10 days, that's all that's left. 10 days for Barcelona to decide whether Marcus Rashford is worth 30 million euros to them. And the clock is ticking louder than most people seem to realize right now. Because here's what's actually happening. Rashford has agreed personal terms. He wants to stay at the Camp Nou permanently. Hansi Flick told him to his face that he's part of the plans. The player did everything right. 14 goals, 14 assists on loan. And he's still sitting there waiting on a club that just spent 80 million euros on Anthony Gordon and is apparently now having second thoughts about whether they even need him. And Manchester United are watching this. They're frustrated. That's the word coming out. Frustrated because they need a resolution. They need that 30 million to land. They need those wages cleared and they need to be able to close the door on the Rashford chapter completely. And instead they're watching Barcelona stall, negotiate, delay, doing everything except what was agreed. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Villa and Spurs are apparently already in the picture. Both clubs have made contact with Rashford's representatives. Both are reportedly ready to meet the 30 million valuation that United are holding firm on. So if Barcelona let June 15th pass without triggering that clause, and it's genuinely looking like they might, Rashford doesn't disappear into some awkward limbo. He has options, Premier League options, top 6 options. I'm Bella, by the way. Welcome to Bella Mufc Analysis. If this kind of deep dive United content is what you're here for, hit subscribe and come into the discussion because we are absolutely not short of material this summer. Right, back to Rashford, because I want to stay on this a little longer before we move into the transfer stories that directly affect the squad being built. The thing that gets me about this whole situation is how perfectly it illustrates the difference between wanting a player and being willing to pay for a player. Barcelona genuinely wanted Rashford. Flick was a big advocate. The player had a brilliant season by any objective measure. And yet the moment Anthony Gordon becomes available, the moment they see a different option in that position, suddenly 30 million becomes too much. Suddenly they need to renegotiate. Suddenly there are financial constraints. Meanwhile, United are over there like, we have the contract, we have the clause, we have the deadline, pay it or don't. There's no negotiation to be had because there was never supposed to be a negotiation. The option was set at 30 million for a reason. And if Barca choose not to activate it, that's their decision. But United will not be lowering their price to make it easier for a club that's simultaneously spending 80 million on another winger. That's a firm and correct position in my opinion, because the moment United start negotiating down from an agreed clause, they lose credibility in every future negotiation they enter. INEOS have drawn the line, good, and honestly, if the outcome is Rashford moving to Villa or Spurs on United's terms, I can live with that. The money comes in, the wages come off, and the chapter closes cleanly. What would be a disaster is a second loan. A second loan with no buy option, no resolution, no clarity, just kicking the problem another year down the road. And Rashford's camp apparently floated that idea. To their credit, United completely rejected it. No loan, pay the clause or we find another buyer. Now, I know some United fans still have complicated feelings about Rashford. He came through the academy, he was supposed to be the one who stayed and led the next era, and it didn't work out that way. But I think you have to separate the emotional side from the business side. He played well at Barcelona. He showed he's still a good player. A 30 million sale is good business given where we were 12 months ago when his career looked genuinely stalled under Amorim. So wherever he ends up, I think we close that chapter having handled it professionally. Right? Now let me talk about something that I actually think is the most strategically significant story of the entire summer for this club. And it involves a 23-year-old from Nottingham, Elliot Anderson, Forest, and Manchester City coming in with a bid that got knocked straight back. Now, I've been watching this Anderson situation develop for a while, and what's happening right now is fascinating. City have moved first. They've made an opening offer. Forest said no. And the reason Forest said no is that they want over £100 million for a 23-year-old midfielder, and they genuinely believe they'll get it. Think about that for a second. Forest, who only signed Anderson 2 summers ago from Newcastle, are now holding out for a fee that would eclipse the Declan Rice deal. That's not arrogance. That's Forest understanding the market, understanding who's interested, and understanding that when Manchester City come knocking before a World Cup, you do not accept the first offer. City's urgency here is real. Anderson is in the England squad. He wants his future sorted before June 17th, before the World Cup starts. He's already agreed personal terms with City. He wants to go there, and City's sporting director, Hugo Viana, sees him as a cornerstone of the post-Guardiola rebuild. So this is not a casual pursuit. This is City's statement signing of the summer, and they know it. But here's the thing that United fans need to pay attention to, because United are also in this picture. Carrick wanted Anderson. The club tracked him seriously, and then they looked at the price and apparently decided they weren't going to get into a bidding war with City, which on one level is understandable. If City are willing to go above 100 million and you're not, you step away. But on another level, it raises a question about what United's actual transfer strategy is this summer when it comes to midfield. Because we know Ederson is coming in from Atalanta. That deal is essentially done, terms agreed, around 38 million. Good signing, good business. But Carrick reportedly wants 2 more midfielders. And if Anderson is off the table because City are willing to overpay, who's next? Fabrizio Romano dropped something interesting. He said Sandro Tonali is emerging as a strong option for City if the Anderson deal falls through, and that Arsenal are also keen on Tonali. Now, what's notable is that Tonali is also linked with United. INEOS have been monitoring his situation. Carrick admires him. But the sticking point is apparently that Tonali himself, if he were to leave Newcastle, would prefer a return to Serie A. So you've got this situation where United's top midfielder targets keep running into walls. Anderson is probably going to City for a fee United won't match. Tonali's preference is Italy, not England. And yet there's apparently also a player described only as someone who's been given the green light to change clubs this summer, with United as his first pick. That detail, a first pick, matters. Because in a summer where everyone is chasing the same names, finding a player who actually wants to come to Old Trafford is genuinely valuable. I do want to come back to Matheus Fernandes as a name to watch here, because the timing of that report feels deliberate. It feels like United are working multiple angles simultaneously and making sure alternatives are in place if the bigger moves stall. Which actually speaks to something I think Carrick and INEOS have handled reasonably well so far this window. They moved quickly on Ederson. Club to club done, personal terms done, early, decisive, no drama. That's a lesson learned from previous United transfer windows where everything dragged into September. And even if the Ederson signing gets formally confirmed closer to the window opening, having those agreements in place now means the player is locked in. Now, I want to spend a moment on the striker conversation because it's one that I keep seeing discussed differently depending on who you ask. The 4 names reportedly on United's shortlist: Osimhen, Lewandowski, Vlahović, Mateta. And before we even dig into the football, I want to flag something important that Romano confirmed. Osimhen currently has no knowledge of any concrete negotiations for his exit from Galatasaray. The Nigerian coach made some noise about talks and movements, but nothing has been communicated to Osimhen directly. He represents himself through his lawyers, and his lawyers apparently know nothing. So when you see the breathless reporting about Osimhen being a United priority, just hold on a second. That doesn't mean the interest isn't real. United clearly admire him, and Van Nistelrooy actually went on record naming him as his preferred option from that list of 4. But there's a significant gap between admiring a player and being in concrete negotiations. And now Atletico Madrid are apparently sniffing around too, with the situation around Julian Alvarez's future leaving them potentially short in attack. So if United are serious about Osimhen, they need to move beyond the monitoring phase and into the conversation phase, and quickly, before Atletico get there first. But here's my actual take on the striker list, because I think Osimhen and Lewandowski represent 2 completely different philosophies about what this squad needs. Osimhen is 27. He's physical, direct, electric in transition, and when he's right, he's genuinely world class. He had 22 goals and 8 assists across all competitions this season at Galatasaray. But he's had his injury concerns, and the fee would be enormous. Newcastle held firm at 75 million for Tonali, and Galatasaray's price for Osimhen is going to be significantly higher than that. Lewandowski is 37, and I know what you're thinking. 37. Why are we even discussing him? But hear me out. United are returning to the Champions League. Sesko is the long-term striker, but he's still developing. If you bring in Lewandowski as a rotation option, smart, experienced, still scoring consistently, there's an argument for it. The risk is the age and whether he can handle the physical demands of the Premier League. The argument for is that he's the type of player who makes everyone around him better, and he still knows where the goal is. Vlahović, I've never quite been convinced by for a United move. He's a good player, but his goal return at Juventus has been inconsistent and his hold-up play has genuine limitations. And Mateta, I like Mateta actually. I think he's underrated, and his directness and movement would suit how Carrick wants United to play. But is he a marquee enough signing for a club returning to the Champions League? That's the question. United need to make a decision on their striker identity this summer, rather than picking from a list of 4 names with no clear priority. What kind of striker suits this system? What kind of striker suits this rebuild? Get clear on that question and the answer probably becomes obvious. And while we're on the topic of attack, Iliman Ndiaye. I want to talk about him because I think he's being slightly overlooked in this conversation. Joe Thomas at the Liverpool Echo reported United are tracking Ndiaye as a potential left-winger option, with Morgan Rogers being the bigger target, but Everton apparently in a strong position to either resist or dictate the terms of any sale. And what I find interesting about Ndiaye is the profile. He's 26, he's versatile, he can play both flanks and in behind as a 10, and he plays with real intensity and creativity. He scored 17 goals and provided 3 assists in 71 appearances for Everton. And crucially, Everton have publicly said they don't need to sell. He's still got 3 years on his contract, but there's a detail in the reporting that changes the calculation. He's apparently rejected proposals for a new deal. And when a player rejects a new contract at Everton, while United and Liverpool are both watching, that's a player who wants to move. That's a player who sees the door opening. And the price, probably somewhere in the 30 to 40 million range, is manageable for United given the level of interest. The Morgan Rogers alternative is interesting too. He's 23, he came into the season as a revelation at Villa, and he's the kind of player who can operate as a left winger and then eventually grow into a Bruno Fernandes type 10. Multiple clubs are chasing him. Villa may be forced to sell for financial reasons, but United would be competing with most of the top 6 for his signature, and Villa aren't going to let him go cheap. So United have 2 viable options at different price points and different risk profiles for the left side of their attack. The right decision probably depends on what else they spend this summer. If Osimhen costs a fortune, you take the Ndiaye deal and move on. If the striker budget stays lower, maybe you stretch for Rogers, which brings me to something that's hovering over this entire transfer window like a cloud, the ownership situation. That tweet claiming Sheikh Jassim is ready to submit a new takeover bid. I have to be straight with you. The credibility on that one is not there. The Daily Mail specifically reported that Jassim's group has not been approached formally or informally and would be highly unlikely to make an offer even if they were. That story seems to be circulating on social media without much substance behind it. What we do know is that some Glazer family members are reportedly open to selling, and the claim from Turki Al-Sheikh, the Saudi sports supremo, that a deal is at an advanced stage was publicly denied by Manchester United. Ben Jacobs reported there's a UAE consortium that may be internally organising itself but hasn't placed a formal bid. So there's smoke. There's definitely smoke. Whether there's fire yet, genuinely unclear. And as a United fan, I find myself in 2 minds about this. Part of me has stopped getting excited about ownership stories because we've been through this cycle so many times. There's a rumour, there's excitement, it goes nowhere, nothing changes. But another part of me, the part that watches what's happening at City with their post-Guardiola rebuild, what's happening at Arsenal with their investment, what's happening at Liverpool, that part of me knows that the ownership question is ultimately the most important story of the next 5 years for this club. Not individual transfers, not Carrick's system, not even the World Cup. Who owns Manchester United and what they're willing to invest? That's the question everything else feeds into. And right now, that question doesn't have a clear answer. What INEOS have done this summer in terms of the transfer approach, decisive on Ederson, firm on Rashford, working multiple midfield angles, suggests a level of organisation that the club lacked for years. But the structural question remains, how much can this club compete financially with City, with Arsenal, with the clubs who have simpler, cleaner ownership structures and no debt legacy hanging over them? Anderson is the perfect test case. If United genuinely want him, if Carrick genuinely believes he's the right midfielder, can they compete? Or do they step back and find a second choice because City are willing to go where United won't? That decision will tell you a lot about where this club actually is right now. I want to leave you with this thought because I think it ties everything together. This summer is the first full summer of the Carrick era. The Ederson signing suggests intent, bringing in quality, moving quickly, building a midfield with real Premier League credentials. The Rashford resolution, however it lands, closes a chapter that needed closing. The striker search is more complicated and needs clarity. And the Anderson situation is the one I'm watching most closely because the way United respond to City's pursuit tells us whether this club is genuinely competing at the highest level or whether there's still a gap. The World Cup starts on June 17th. June 15th is the Rashford deadline. Between now and then, this transfer window could genuinely transform, positively or negatively. A lot is going to happen in the next 10 days. So Rashford to Villa, Spurs, or somehow Barcelona, Anderson to City, and who replaces that ambition at United? And are United genuinely in the striker conversation or still just monitoring from a distance? Tell me what you think. Drop it in the comments. Because this is exactly the kind of summer where every United fan has an opinion and every opinion is worth hearing.